Hello everyone, and welcome to Update on the Economy. This one's infrastructure and more. When I chose the subject, it was great at the time, and now there's so much more happening that we'll probably touch upon a lot of things today. First, I want to thank you very much for all of the questions you sent. I got a lot of questions, and I'm standing by if more questions arrive. As I'm speaking on these subjects. Again, you're spending time, an hour out of your day to listen to me, either in the recording later, which most of you do, or physically here today. So I have combined a lot of the questions into some of the topics today in the interest of time and touching upon a lot of different areas. But please, again, if you have additional questions, everything's open and ready to go. So today I was going to talk a bit about infrastructure, a bit about the economy, the risks and the opportunities. I say the best for last. Inflation, the stimulus, and the GDP numbers that came out today too. Got some questions on that. And the biggie is Biden's tax plan. Lots of questions came around about that. I'm going to save that one for last and really focus more on your questions because it isn't finalized yet. These are talking points. These are proposals that he's putting out there. And it caught a lot of people by surprise, a lot of these potential tax increases and new policies around taxes. I say it shouldn't because he said he was going to do this before he was elected. And he had it on his website. And I've also talked about it before. It's just now it's actually coming to fruition. And I will say one thing. I'm going to, I guess, probably address this one first because it got the most questions. It's one thing to put out an idea, it's another thing to actually get it passed. A lot of Democrats in the Congress are very nervous about this tax plan, very nervous, and they need 100% to get this through. They need 100% of people on. So it's almost certain that it's going to be significantly different when, and I want to say if it passes, some form of it will likely pass. It will be significantly different than the proposals that are laid out. The other part of it is that there's a lot of headlines on this, oh, if you make less than $400,000 a year in your household, you're not affected. That's not entirely true because there's more to the tax policy than just the federal tax bracket. So that is correct. The proposal with the federal tax bracket increases does not affect those making less than $400,000, at least again in this run. But there are many other taxes in there that could have significant impacts. Most of them, many of them, can be mitigated by proper planning. I cannot stress enough the importance of working with me or our team at Sequoia or your own financial professionals and really make sure you plan around this because there could potentially be things that you can do, and I'm using potentially here because everybody's situation is different, to mitigate many of these effects. So it's very important. When we get clarity, we will be reaching out to those of you that could potentially be affected, but we also encourage you to reach out to us as well, because sometimes there's things going on in your life that you haven't yet told us about, and we want to be sure to be on top of this. But it is broad, it is significant, and it comes from trying to find ways to pay for the proposed roughly to date around $6 trillion in spending that's coming about with the various proposals of the Biden administration. And I won't get into whether they're good or bad. That's a matter of perspective, but they have to find a way to pay for it. The math doesn't work on it's going to be paid for in taxes alone. It doesn't work. So there's probably going to be some other ways of doing it, including and most likely adding to the national debt. And these are issues, again, that we're watching very closely. So I'm going to watch for your tax questions on that, but just understand that we don't really have clarity, and in what's being talked about may never manifest. So my major intention today is simply to reduce some of the fear and concern and worry around that. Work with your financial planners and your financial professionals to see what, if anything, you can do when this happens. It is unlikely, highly unlikely, this will be retroactive to the beginning of this year. It is almost certain, as of today, it is almost certain that this would take effect next year. So as we have clarity, year-end planning is going to be absolutely key on that. Again, send questions as you have them. Okay, I kind of picked the topics in order of interest by questions. Hopefully that will work, and that I think I'll actually even have extra time if more questions come in. The economy. The question I get, and I got a lot of them around this, is are we in a bubble? Why is everything doing so well when we're in the middle of a pandemic, et cetera, et cetera? There's a lot of reasons for that, but this is not a bubble in the sense of excess in the system that's not backed by something. If you want to use the term bubble, what is causing this is the tremendous amounts of money that's being pumped in the system. Think about the number, let's even just use $2 trillion, which was just the most recent stimulus, not accounting for all the stimulus before that and all the programs and spending that's proposed going forward. How many of us really understand what $2 trillion is? It is a massive amount of money. And on the most recent one, the first one of the Biden administration, around 400 and some billion dollars of that was direct payments to individuals. Okay, so that was the portion that went directly to individuals. The vast majority of that money went to people that were not financially impacted by COVID. Impacted. In other words, doesn't mean they need the money or want the money. It means that they didn't have a financial loss around COVID. Their business wasn't shut down. They didn't lose their jobs, etc. The vast majority. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I have seen it, and it's pretty significant. And what that means is if everything shut down, as it has been for a while, or much of the economy was shut down, and this excess money's coming in, it gets saved. And if I can put it into this presentation, I'll show you a couple slides. The consumer savings rate has never, ever been this high. The household savings rate has never been this high. It is massive. The money was socked away. The money was saved. The money was saved. Why? It wasn't an issue of lack of demand. It was an issue of people couldn't go and do what they wanted to do or what they normally did, or didn't feel safe doing what they normally did. And so spending continued. That's how the economy stayed strong throughout much of 2020. Instead of people going to their local store, they bought it on Amazon. The businesses that were open did amazingly well during this time. We still spent money, we just spent it differently, right? And that continued to support the economy, but there's still a lot of savings. A lot of that money went into real estate, tremendous amounts. I can read off the numbers to you a little bit later. Tremendous amounts of money went into real estate. Unlike 2008, or say 2005, through 2008, when you had a lot of excess, people borrowing money they couldn't afford to pay back, two things are different about real estate this time. One is people really do have the money. They're paying cash. Either they've sold a property, they have stock options, inheritance, or the like. They're paying cash, or they're borrowing at incredibly cheap interest rates. The cheap interest rates and mortgages are supported by the Fed. The Fed wants to keep mortgage rates low. They're buying most of the mortgage-backed securities right now. And they're doing this because it stimulates the economy. At some point, they'll slow down their purchases and you'll start to see mortgage rates rise. We don't know when that point will be. Whenever they feel it's the time. When they feel it's the time, they'll start, and it won't, unlikely to be a spike, it'll be a gradual move up. It could happen relatively soon because of how heated the real estate market is. It could be a while out because it's not just the price of housing and the real estate market itself, it's all the ancillary businesses that benefit from that. And the tax dollars as well for municipalities and states. So that's a lot of it. Those people who are getting mortgages, by and large, are qualified, and they have to put a big chunk of money down. Well, gone are the days of the ninja loans. So that's a different housing market this way. While housing could cool off at some point, and likely will cool off, it is unlikely to plummet because the demand of people, it's a population, and where they want to live is what's driving this. Now, not all markets are the same, and all the real estate professionals here are probably thinking that as I speak right now. I'm speaking national numbers. It's interesting when you break it down by areas and regions. I am not a real estate professional, but the two areas actually that didn't see really big growth and actually somewhat decline in real estate was actually Las Vegas and Chicago. Chicago was largely the policies put in place that made homeownership a lot less attractive there. Could be the state as well. The state has really been struggling in a lot of ways. Las Vegas, because they were so dependent on the hospitality and leisure industries, it made it a lot more attractive for people to buy and move there at the time. The rest of the Nevada, northern Nevada, is completely on fire right now. I can speak from personal experience of working in the office over there and seeing what's going on to the markets there. But the areas that were more dependent on hospitality and leisure, for the most part, didn't do as well. But then I get to bring up the exception to that, Florida. Florida, you would think Florida economy would have been slammed. Dependent very much on the cruise ships, very much on leisure. That's a state, a lot of retirees, which arguably would be the most cautious population about going out. Actually, economy has done pretty dang well, largely because they've been open. I have a chart, the unemployment numbers, levels. So I can pull that up for you real quick here. It'd be interesting. Bear with me while okay. I just want to show you this chart quickly. This is about a month old now, so it's not current. It's probably adjusted a bit, but this is the unemployment numbers by states. And it just shows the difference. You can see the states with the highest unemployment numbers, makes sense, right? The states that were most locked down. The states with the lowest unemployment numbers were the states that were more open. Why is that important? That's where the economic stimulus came from. And that's largely what is driving other states to open up as quickly as they feel prudent. It's really having an impact on their economies, and they're feeling it. And it's known that the government stimulus will not continue. The government, that $2 trillion or so that just passed, a lot of that money went to states, the reason being to help them around COVID. But a lot of these states were also having some struggles beforehand, especially with pension obligations and the like. So there's a little bit of sigh of relief, a little bit of extra breath for these areas, but no one expects it to continue in the same way. And so they're looking for how are they going to pick up their economies. Opening is key. So I kind of touched around that. So the risks, the biggest risks I see right now in the economy are areas that we haven't yet seen it, but it's probably coming. And it's oddly in the real estate sector, third tier office buildings, okay? Not the Class A office space, but the third tier office space is going to be more challenged because companies are opening and companies are bringing people back to the workplace, and whether we do not expect there's going to be this mass exodus from offices, there will be less people for at least a short while, and it will put pressure because people are going to want to generally be in nicer offices. That area and retail malls as well. Many small businesses didn't make it, sadly, through this time of being shut down, and it will be very hard for them to recover as people have changed their habits. And that's something. So if you have a local business that you like and you want to support and you feel safe doing so, get out there and support them, because they really are struggling, because so many people changed habits when things were locked down. It's kind of hard to change back. You started buying your dog food through Chewy or Amazon. Do you really get in the car and drive down to the dog food place that you went to, or the pet store that's local? These are challenges that small businesses are facing, and the effects that will be the malls. Another one is on a larger scale in the stock market is probably 40 to 50% of the S&P 500 companies have what we call zombie debt. They issued a lot of debt over the last 10 years or so when interest rates were low, and they did a lot of things like buy back their own stock, a lot of other things there that were short-term moves, but they're holding that debt. As time progresses, they're going to have to refinance that debt. If revenues are good and the economy's good and the company's doing well, they can get away with that for a long time. Interest rates stay low. As interest rates rise in the future, it's going to put a lot of pressure on these companies, because they either have to take a lot of their revenue and pay off that debt when it matures, or increasing amounts of their revenue are going to be used to pay the interest on that debt. And so this is kind of what I call the slow burn. I'm watching these companies really closely. Before you get scared about the S&P 500 index and the stock market, it is market cap weighted, which means the largest companies hold a larger percentage of those 500 companies. It kind of tiers down. So just saying that it's not like 40 or 50% of that market is going to go bad. That's not the case. A lot of these companies are smaller in there, but they're widely held, especially in index funds. So it's really important to be mindful and aware of what you own, and watchful for those of you that are doing it yourselves. So those are the biggest risks. Biggest opportunities: technology, but maybe not where you think. So people think of the big tech companies, but there's a lot of other industries that are adapting to technology, companies within other industries that are adapting to technology rapidly. And they are getting ahead of their peers at a pretty significant pace. I know I've talked about this quite a bit, in my earlier webinars over this last year, but it's accelerating. There's amazing things going on in technology. If you look at, Skylink, which is going up with the satellite availability, anyone in the world from anywhere can access internet connectivity. What will that do to the world? What will they say? And that's just one example, and you guys heard that on our innovation talk when we had the ARC people on talking about that. They do much better than I do. I'm better reading it than I am speaking about it. I still have it's outside of my expertise. But that being said, it's not just the companies that are developing the technology, it's the adaptation of the technology in industries and companies that you wouldn't ordinarily think of as tech companies. This accelerated with the fact that when things were shut down, companies had to figure out how to do things differently if they wanted to stay in business. And some did an amazing job at that. Others are still struggling. You see it on all levels of companies, but it's fascinating to see the adaptation of it in industries like agriculture and infrastructure. One area that you can really start to see people pulling ahead right now is something else I want to talk about, which is the supply chain. Because as I mentioned last time, it hasn't gotten any better. The supply chain is a mess. Some of you, or many of you, may have noticed that going to the store. Anyone try to buy an appliance recently? It's really tough to do. I mean, if you go into the showroom, they have very little, and it's back ordered for a very long period of time. And the thing is that the demand for durable goods skyrocketed based on this morning's GDP data. Skyrocketed. Consumers are spending a lot of money on durable goods. May have something to do with housing. You buy a new house, you want a new refrigerator. May have a lot to do with remodeling or upgrading things. It also has a lot to do with the fact that the supply chain globally is a mess right now. And it's not this fine-tuned, integrated, high-tech structural system. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that are piecemeal, and one disruption over here affects a lot of things over here. We kind of saw that with toilet paper early in the pandemic or early in the shelter in place, where we're seeing it kind of across the board now. I was out at the Nevada office last week. I go back and forth there. I have never seen this many trucks on the road. It is not a lack of truck drivers. Actually, it is, because every single truck seems to have, "We're hiring, join our team," on the back of it. There's a lot of trucks on the road. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of money in the system right now, and that's what's creating it. But the supply chain shut down and is trying to figure out how to build back up. It was caught unaware of the demand, the rapid demand pickup that we had from the raw materials on, which this is very important, because this is what's creating inflation right now. So the big question I got from lots of people is, what about inflation? When is inflation coming? Do we have inflation? Inflation's getting bad. We do. We have it in materials. We have it in energy. We have it in certainly in durable goods right now. The costs are rising because it's costing more to build them. We're seeing inflation kind of in certain areas, and it's picking up quickly. We don't yet know if it's transitory or if it's something that's more permanent. When I say transitory, that short-term disconnect between the supply and the demand can create inflation. If that's the case, this will last about 6 to 9 months. If it goes on beyond that or starts accelerating beyond that, and the supply is not able to pick up with the demand, then we're probably going to have a more significant and more sustained situation. I bring that up because there's a lot of different ways of measuring inflation. The government has their official CPI number. That doesn't represent most people's lives. Each one of us has our own personal inflation number. What are we spending our money on, and how much does it cost? And if this costs more, can we do something a little differently, or do we forego that, or do we spend a lot more of our money on that? That's a choice. Who this impacts the very most is the people living off of a fixed income. People that are retired or living off of passive income, even if not retired. This has an impact because you have a fixed amount of money coming in, but your costs are rising. Planning around this is going to be really, really important, especially since there's no real expectations that interest rates on the Fed side are going to rise meaningfully in the near future. They've made that very clear. You'll see bumps here and there in the markets. You'll see bonds drop and interest rates go up. You'll see these kind of spikes here and there. But overall, the Fed's made it very clear they don't intend to do anything unless their hand is forced. In fact, they'll even allow inflation to go a bit higher. So still don't see hyperinflation. Still don't know how significant it's going to be, but it is with us. And it's something that many of us have not experienced. Well, some of us not even our lifetimes, but many of us for many, many years when you start to see those costs rise. The other thing is it will spread through the system. right? When the cost of materials go up, it takes a while for that to hit the consumer, but more and more. So that the supply chain though is also creating it, right? If the supply chain's a mess, you want to sell your products to your customers, you're going to deplete your inventory to do that. And that came across in the GDP numbers. They have one thing that did not increase in that amazing GDP number that came out this morning was inventories, because they can't get the stuff in as fast as it's going out the door. And that's us spending the money that we have as a nation. In fact, at some point I should actually talk a little bit about the GDP. So for this one, sorry for the glare here, I'm going to put the glasses on. So GDP, 6.4% this morning. That's an amazing number, fascinating number, right? People are like, wow, like more than double what it used to be. That's amazing. Some people make it political. Oh, it's an amazing administration. It's really none of that. It's the direct result of piling a lot of money into the economy over the last year and opening up the economy enough that people are going out and doing things. They just announced, I guess maybe it's the CDC, I think that's the one who announced this morning that cruise ships can resume travel in the summer. Cruise ships, can you believe that? Those were the things everybody was really scared of about this time last year. They're opening up and they're filling up like crazy. The demand is filling up. People want to travel. People want to do things. That pent up demand. So you throw a lot of money into the system between the Federal Reserve and the government spending, and you put a lot of money into the system, and then you start opening it up. You open it up through vaccines. You know, people feel safe. They're vaccinated. They feel safe to go out and do things. And you open it up through reducing the regulations and the restrictions that the government's put in place in some parts of the nation. This is all just a direct result of that. And that is something to keep in mind. All of this money in the system, if not very efficiently and effectively sucked out by the Fed or efficiently spent and used over time, is going to create problems for this nation in the future. The question I get asked a lot is, how high can our deficit go before it creates a crash or problems, or we get in trouble like other nations have in the past doing this very same activity? And my answer is, nobody knows. It is completely unknown. We are in uncharted territory. We don't know what that number is. The good news is that there's signs that will tell us that we're getting close, and we haven't hit that yet. However, what politicians from both parties have learned is voters like money. Voters like checks. And both parties, in their own ways, love to give money to the voters. If this behavior continues, it's without finding ways to pay for it, then we are going to have problems down the road, most certainly. And I don't want to be a doom and gloom person. We can solve for this, but we have to find ways to pay for these things and not just by running up the debt. So I would just give a couple more on the GDP, so I picked this up. The big contributors, I say, home building up 10.6% year over year, annual rate, sorry. That was a big contributor to it. Personal consumption, though, was the star of the show. It's a 4.1% annual rate in quarter one. Why is that important? 4.1% in quarter one. That's quarter one of 2020 before the whole COVID thing happened. So consumers are spending over 4% more than they were before the shelter in place and before COVID, the lockdowns took effect. And that's the fact that still many people are not traveling. They're not going to concerts. They're not going to sporting events. Well, in most of the country anyway, they're not doing a lot of things that people spent a lot of money on before, and we're still spending 4% more. That's a direct result of the money in the system. Again, I say money, excess money. Economically, it's excess money, but I think it's a matter of opinion or individuals. Consumer spending on durable goods. Remember the appliances I talked to you about? Automobiles, things like that. 41% annual rate increase. Businesses spent on equipment, investment in equipment, technology and otherwise, 16.7%. Home building, let's say the highest one I told you at 10.6%. And I think I'll skip past a lot of the real estate numbers. They're readily available. If someone wants them, I'll give them to you. They're very meaningful, but they're not bubble territory. You see, they're meaningful without bubble territory. It is a supply-demand issue. It takes a while to get the land, to get the government approvals, to get the permits, to get the materials, to get the workers, especially now, get the workers, and to put up a house. This takes time, and I'm sure all the construction people and real estate people on this can tell you all the details to that. It takes time. You can't turn it on like a light switch. You can't suddenly develop a website that can do something, or a technology can do something. It takes time. So the demand was just greater than the supply. And in certain parts of the market, it's been very, very, very heated. But even when the heat stops, even when the interest stops, so the real estate market slows down, or interest rates on mortgages go up, any of the things that will drive it down, a crash is unlikely unless there's a significant government policy that's put in place on a local or a state or a national level. I use California as an example. Even though California has had a significant out-migration, it's actually been going on for 10 years, and it just accelerated through COVID. Significant out-migration. California has one great thing going for it. Well, it has a lot of great things going for it, and some not so great things going for it. But that being said, one is Prop 13. Prop 13 is an amazing thing, and it allows people to afford to stay in their homes for a very long period of time. Even with Prop 19 repealing a lot of the benefits of transferring those low tax bases to your children, it's still a thing that makes housing a lot more affordable here, especially if you've been in your house for a long period of time, than it is for others. The downside to that is it also makes housing a lot more expensive because of supply and demand. If you don't want to leave because you like your tax base, it's really hard for someone else to move into your house. And that's creating a lot of that. But even in states that don't have a Prop 13, you're still seeing that growth. And again, it's a supply-demand issue combined with the money and the low interest rates in the mortgage market. Okay, I'm going to get to questions here in just a few minutes. Sorry, I want to make sure I cover this. Let's see. So I think I covered like the risk, the opportunities on a high level. I can get into detail, but the regulators who review these videos don't like me to do anything that sounds like investment recommendations. I will say that I'm allowed to do that to anyone on an individual basis. I'm just not allowed to do it in a public forum. So if you're more curious, like where are the opportunities, where are the specific risks, I can get into that individually on a better level than I'm allowed to in a public forum. So not trying to dodge the specifics to that, just trying to stay in compliance with the rules. Okay, let's see. I think I touched upon the Biden tax fund, the stimulus, the infrastructure plan, which some of you may have actually come to hear about. It's not really laid out yet. The specifics of it aren't entirely clear. The one thing I'd like to address, though, is the word infrastructure, because I think that's where people sometimes can get a little pulled one direction or the other. Many of us, when we hear the word infrastructure, we think of roads and bridges and trains and sewer pipes, electricity, the kind of traditional infrastructure. But infrastructure is actually a pretty subjective word. It can mean a lot of things. So if you look at, because this was a comment that I gotten from some of the questions, if you look at Biden's infrastructure plan, a relatively small percent, 6 to 9%, is truly going to traditional infrastructure. And that's been the argument against it. It's so much spending on his pet projects or things that have nothing to do with infrastructure. But it depends how you define infrastructure. And I'm not going to get into if it's good or if it's bad, if it's right or it's wrong. That's obviously up for debate I'm sure, in Congress as well as us as individuals. But the expansiveness nature of this plan means a lot of money is being spent on things that we don't traditionally think of as infrastructure. As an economist, nonpartisan here, as an economist, I would say we have to think of infrastructure differently than we have traditionally if we want to stay ahead of China, because they're doing it. And this is an economic issue. Our power as a nation, our ability to print and distribute all of this money and do something that no other nation in the world has even come close to what we've done over this last year, and still be doing well as a country, economically as a country, is our fact that we're the economic superpower. Okay, this is critical. If for all of the things that we are doing for our population, all of the things that we want to do for our population, we have the power because of our position economically, technically militarily as well, but our power within the world. If we lose that footing, we very quickly, a lot of things that we just become to depend on will be gone for us. Again, not a doom and gloomer. We're not even close to that point right now. But it is very important for us to continue to innovate and look at different ways of doing things, but certainly keep things up with the standards that are. Even state by state, infrastructure is very, very different. Many people, I'm sure my clients from out of state, they come to California and they can't believe what terrible condition our roads are in. Apparently, I don't travel to a lot of states except by air. I don't know, but apparently our roads are really bad compared to the rest of the nation. So there's an area that California hasn't kept up with as much as other states. And I would say that there are other states that probably have their areas that we would go and say, oh my gosh, this is terrible as well. And it's a piecemeal thing. Why is that? Why are we not like on top of our roads and our bridges and really putting money towards something that arguably it's really bipartisan? Everybody needs it. Everybody needs working sewers and working electricity and roads, and we all need it. So why aren't we doing this? It's not even up for debate. It's not partisan or anything like that. It is because it doesn't get you votes as well. So politicians of both parties, they need the votes. That's how they get in office and how they stay in office. And they're not necessarily the most attractive things to say, I'm going to spend X amount of money on revamping our sewer system. Because that doesn't get you votes unless it failed. Unless it failed. When infrastructure fails, it gets a lot of attraction. People are like, yes, we got to fix it. Whatever it takes, fix it. We have to stop this. We have to fix this. But when it's working fine, the preventative maintenance just doesn't get the votes. It doesn't get the attraction as with the people. And so money gets diverted to things that are more attractive. Let's put it towards this program or that program or this or that. This is what I stand for, so I believe in. And it captures the hearts and the minds of the voters. And that's largely why a lot of our infrastructure in this nation hasn't been updated for many, many, many years and is in disrepair. In addition to the fact it's inefficient because technological advances have allowed things to be done differently. And so tying in infrastructure, the infrastructure spending with things like how can we be, do more towards the climate, be more efficient, produce less fossil fuels, do things more efficiently so when we have a severe weather event, our power doesn't go down, right? People can, get through it. What happened in Texas has happened before. I think back in the 1920s or 30s or something like that. It's not like severe, strange weather events don't happen. Wildfires, massive wildfire outbreaks in California, if they cut in half large redwood trees where they can have thousands of years of data, they can see severe fire years where this has happened. None of these things are surprises, but upgrading our infrastructure to adapt to the changes that are taking place and the fact that the populations are moving further and further afield is very important. But looking at it beyond just the traditional infrastructure of technology, of bringing things in a balanced and fair way to a greater number of people. And I'm speaking economically here. I'm not getting into the social aspects at all. Economically, it is good for our nation to be on the forefront of this and not be second to other countries. So there's a lot of spend on this. If it's done right, is a better bang for the buck than the stimulus has been. Okay, I hope I don't ruffle any feathers when I say that. As an economist, purely as an economist, I completely understand that if you lost your job and we're going to lose your home, and a lot was going on this last year, the stimulus check was a priority for you. I'm speaking as an economist on a national level, that anytime we spend money that benefits a greatest number of people, it's the most bang for the buck economically. It's also more long-lived. So if the Democrats and Republicans can find a way to work on this and agree, some things will get thrown out, some things will get added, it won't look the same when it's all said and done. It is probably the greatest chance that we have to do something bipartisan, because it has been both Democrats and Republicans have been talking about this at least 2 or 3 administrations back. It's not like a new idea. It's getting further along in that process. So it would be great to, and I'm saying this economically, it would be great to see if we're going to run up our debt, if we're going to find these programs we want to do, this is probably a great place to start for a lot of reasons. And again, economically, it will generate jobs, and it will generate jobs in newer technologies, and it will generate a better quality of life for most of our country. It seems strange that in California with such a strong economy that we consider it completely normal to lose our power throughout the year. Intentionally, right? It's shut down intentionally for wildfires and things like that. These things, can be solved for. sorry if I sound a little soapboxy there, but I look at the numbers and I look at what's possible, and I think that there's a lot of room for the two parties to figure this out, and it would be a good thing for the economy as a whole, more so than a lot of this other spending that's being proposed that is more targeted towards more political or partisan, programs or viewpoints. I'm not getting into whether they're right or wrong. I'm saying from an economic standpoint, to borrow tremendous amounts of money from our future to do a very short-term thing is probably not in our interest, because we are borrowing from the future. I know this is old and it's trite, but it's true. This is going to get paid for somehow. It will. I personally think I'd love to see the Fed or the Treasury start issuing 50-year bonds and refinance all of our debt at these low rates, and then we can borrow tremendous amounts more. I'm actually kidding about that. Don't quote me on that. So I want to talk about that because I had a lot of questions around this infrastructure spending. If done properly, it has the power to really drive the economy forward and the power to reduce our costs significantly. It costs a lot of money to maintain outdated infrastructure. A lot of money is wasted. It can be done right. It's my highest hope that if I was in political power, I would say, hey, we're going to raise your taxes a little bit, and we're going to cut government spending. That can bring the parties together to create a plan. I think more so than, hey, we're just doing it our way or the highway. And I understand that Democrats are in power, and every time a party gets in power, they want to get as much pushed through as they can in that short window that they know they can before things may potentially change. But if you want this to be sustained, if you don't want it to be something that gets unrolled, if there's a change in administration in the future, bipartisanship is key. And this has been done in the past when you bring the parties together. So again, getting into the economics of that of all, I've mapped out the spend, the bang to the buck economically on all the proposed programs, and that one by far is the best. It comes to a lot of things too. It does spread. If we're going to have different jobs in the future, is our education system preparing our children and our college graduates for these jobs of the future? All of these things have to be adapted and work together cohesively, not one doing one thing and then one doing the other. So I'm hoping that's answering a lot of those questions. And I know I'll get more. It's and I'm touching upon these things hopefully enough just to kind of inspire or have you think a little differently than a lot of the negativity that's in the news every day. There are very, very real problems that this nation faces, economically and otherwise. I'm not qualified to speak on many of them, and I know there's many different opinions on the best ways of doing things. Ultimately, when looking at this from your perspective, for you, those of you that are my clients, my highest priority is to make sure that you're going to get through this time. You're going to be successful in your life and all the things that you do. So what I see is also what I employ within the portfolios where suitable and appropriate for your plan. And changes happen regularly. There was 2 important pieces of data that came out last week that caused me to change a lot of my projections for the rest of the year. Just constantly watching these things that are important and staying on track for this. And that's, I just want to say that's the kind of the purpose behind all of this. Okay, I'm going to get into some of the questions here because there's a lot of them, but let me quickly check and see. And please bring them up if I don't address them. Okay, I think I covered the biggest ones. Infrastructure, the economy, Biden's tax plan, inflation, stimulus. I will say something else about the Biden's tax plan is it would go better, again, as I came back to it, if there was a bit of a compromise saying we're going to raise taxes here and we're going to cut spending here. Because that kind of mashing those two together would raise more money in a more sustainable way. The problem with taxes, raising taxes, first off, it never really is what people think it is. That kind of idea, oh, I don't make $1 million, doesn't affect me. Oh, I don't make 400,000 in my family, it doesn't affect me. They're never that way. Taxes get passed on. If corporate taxes go up, it gets passed on. And I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. You just have to be aware of the effects, right? And much the same that I said about the Trump administration's tax cuts about a year or so ago. I said, who cuts taxes when the economy's booming? Remember? People like money, right? Voters like checks, voters like money. Just different parties, different ways of doing it. And this too is that the effects of a lot of this I say it's not just the people making 1 million. It's not just the people making 400,000. Some of these proposals, like reducing the tax deductibility of 401k contributions, that affects a lot more people. Right? Changing the capital gains, the reset and basis for inherited assets means it's going to be potentially far more difficult for your children or grandchildren to inherit property. And what people say, well, who cares about that? Well, everyone, most of the young people that can afford to live in, not most, I shouldn't say that because I don't have a number. Many of the young people that are living in our high-priced areas have done so because they've inherited property. It gives them an opportunity to own property and to have a home in a very expensive area that they couldn't have not otherwise afforded. So there are impacts to a lot of these policies with the overall goal of the government raising revenue, but kind of picking and choosing what areas they're going to hit because of the most politically acceptable. So there's a lot in that proposal. It's worth reading if you are interested in it. However, don't attach too much to it yet because I don't think a lot of it, or I should say, I don't think much of it will pass. And what does, we can probably plan around. Since there's so many questions about that one. Let's see. So I'm going to go into questions here. So let me know if there's any others. And please give me your feedback as well if I'm touching upon these things well. Let's see. I love this one because there's a combination of them here. But this question was Biden's tax plan, WTF, question mark. I'm not going to say who sent that. This is pretty good. But some more questions I didn't address around that. And again, before I do, please don't take generalized advice and use it on an individual level because everyone's situation is different. You know, there's no real general advice or recommendation or strategy that can be employed. Everyone's situation is different. It's very important to receive individualized advice by someone who's qualified to give it to you. It's very, very important because that can sometimes what makes a lot of sense for one person makes absolutely no sense for someone else, which ties into the question, should I sell this year? I'm assuming it means selling assets this year when the taxes could potentially be lower. And the answer to that is depends. It really, really is important to get individualized advice because saving taxes is not necessarily the most important thing. But it does I highly recommend because I don't know the name to this person, that you do get specific advice. You get it from your CPA. If they're a strategist CPA and they'll sit down and strategize with you, you get it from a financial planner. It can be us, it can be someone else, but get that advice specifically to you. And I would also wait until there's a little more certainty on it because I have heard people using fear to get people to take actions that benefit these individuals. So be really cautious about that and start planning now, start the planning process now, but review it as there's more clarity to see if there's any changes you should make. It could well be a good year to sell highly appreciated assets if your tax situation will be impacted significantly by that, but never make a decision in isolation of the rest of your plan. Sorry if I sound a little lectury there. It's just so many different things to consider. The other question of that is, how will real estate be affected by Biden's tax plan? Don't know. Certainly it would be an impact for someone selling a house and hitting that $1 million income threshold because they've sold a house that they've had for a long period of time, because then you're going to hit all of the wealthy people taxes. That's been an issue for a long time in planning. Someone who's never really paid a lot of taxes all of a sudden just being hit by a tremendous number of taxes and losing half of the value, right, or half of the appreciation of the home to taxes, and that was the retirement plan. So this again comes down to why it's important to plan. Selling assets could push you in a tax bracket that could attract a lot more taxes. That's been the case for years. It could potentially be higher. Again, comes down to planning. If this question was, will it affect the price of real estate? I don't really know. I don't think there's a direct attraction to it because the demand is so much greater than the supply. And most people are not going to sell their house because they don't want to pay higher taxes in the future. Most people selling their house have another life reason for doing so. Investment property, possibly. We're seeing that now with a lot of people who have investment properties like residential, multifamily, selling them not because of taxes, but selling them because of the effects of the government's memorandums on rent and various things like that, where the tenants only had to pay a portion of their rent. It was just didn't make sense to them financially. But that was really much more government policy or local government policies in relation to COVID than it was anything to do with taxes. But this might push more people to go that direction. I don't know that it will have a major impact. Not my strong area of expertise though. So if you're holding real estate and thinking about that, definitely get the proper guidance and advice. Will there be more stimulus? Depends how you define it. In the form of stimulus checks, unlikely unless something significant happens around COVID. One of the variants becomes immune to the vaccine. We have to shut down again. Maybe something significant happens that's unlikely but possible. So in the near term, I doubt it if you're saying in form of the check that comes to you. However, a lot of Biden's proposals include things like extending child tax credits, child care credits. I don't recall all of them, I apologize. But there's a lot of other forms of stimulus that are going to continue, or they're trying to continue out beyond just this immediate COVID issue to help families, especially families with children. So there is going to be continued stimulus going out for the foreseeable future if all of these proposals pass or pass in some form or another. So the different stimulus for different reasons and different ways, as well as, again, the government's, if these policies pass, there's not just the infrastructure, there's another one coming around to try and help families, the families plan, which, again, we still don't know everything that's in that, just the high level talking points, and we don't know how that will finalize. But for some families, there could be continued stimulus, at least through the rest of this administration, this time here. Or I should say until 2022, depending on how Congress ends up. Will remote working be the future? For some, yes, most certainly, definitely. I think a lot of companies have kind of evaluating this at a company by company level. Sometimes they're looking at what their peers are doing. By and large, businesses do want to bring their workforce back, but they may not bring them back the way they did before. Office space is still going to be a thing. It's the demand for office space is going to disappear. The cities won't be empty. Cities like San Francisco are more challenged because the workforce left, and bringing them back, of course, reinvigorating that may be more of a challenge. Because San Francisco has a lot of issues that a lot of other cities don't have. There's a lot of other reasons people don't want to be in San Francisco than just, where the businesses are. We theorize in the economic front, we'll say a significant portion of the workforce will come back and work as they did before, but companies will offer more flexibility in working and how people work, depending on the employees and their roles, how important they are to be together as opposed to separate, and also depending on the type of business it is. There's a lot to be said for creativity and collaboration. I was in the San Jose office a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people were back in the office. It was really fun just being in an environment with a bunch of people again. You kind of forget how you miss that. At Sequoia, we have a policy of at this time we're keeping it optional. People can be in the office or people can work remotely. As we progress into the summer, we may have days when everyone's in the office, and we may not. We'll just kind of see how things flow. I can speak for Sequoia, our team has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that they just rock working remotely. They've done a great job, and I'm just really impressed with everyone and how well it's gone. And so they've proven they can do it. So if it's more convenient and easy, why not let that continue? Unless, of course, any employment laws or anything comes out that says we can't do it that way anymore. But as for now, it seems to be working. But I do see companies pulling back more people and office spaces being more occupied. The greater challenge is going to be workers that have moved out of the area, may have to change jobs, or the companies may accommodate them working remotely. The other challenge will be, and this is a biggie, schools have to reopen. They have to reopen, and they have to be open the usual school hours and after school programs, whatever was there before. It's critical because a lot of what happened, the unemployment numbers look better than they really are because a lot of people stop looking for work and they're no longer counted as unemployed. That's one anomaly about that. The headline, come on, unemployment's dropping, everything's getting better. We always have to look at the people who've dropped out of the workforce. And when you have a situation when your kids have to learn or be in school at home, remote learning, someone's got to be home with them, right? And not all families can work virtually. I mean, not all families can work from home. A lot of people are still working out of the home. And so it's a challenge, and someone's got to stay home with the kids. So the schools have to reopen, and the would say the COVID numbers would have to be, or the vaccinations, or whatever that comfort level is, has to be there as well. But I would say probably by the end of the summer, things are going to be back more and more and more to normal. I would say to the employers out there, look for what works best for your organization and your employees as well. And for the employees out there, if you prefer to work in the office or work remotely, have the conversation and see what's possible, because that helps decision-making processes in play. But a hybrid type of environment is most likely for many companies going forward, is what we see now, but it's uncertain in a lot of ways. Okay, let's get to the question over here. This is a fun comment. We need water here in California. Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. I am not an environmental expert, and I am not a water expert, but I am surprised that we haven't more seriously considered desalination as an option. If not, we really just have to stop building homes and letting businesses and people move in here, which is probably not going to ever fly. California is very dependent on the income that it gets from businesses and people being here. But it is an issue. I mean, California is an incredibly dry state, most of it. Drive down to Los Angeles, you get down just a little ways on I-5 and everything that's not irrigated is dried up. And population keeps moving in here. It's a pretty big issue. But water here, the effects of climate change, in addition to the effects of a growing population, in addition to the way that we use things and do things, is all having an effect. And it's definitely an issue. And again, when I speak on, I don't know why we haven't tried desalination, it's from someone who actually has no idea what that involves, but it sounds like a really good idea to me. So don't confuse my economic expertise with my desalination expertise. But good comment, though. I want to say that some of you may have noticed this in your portfolio, resources. The demand is just going to increase and increase and increase. It's simply going to be, whether we do an infrastructure plant or not, that's not going away, and the companies that are working in the space will likely do well. Not all, but some of them will. That one was about, okay, another fun comment, and I'll get to the questions. Cleaning up the forest to prevent wildfire spread. I do think that, actually, believe it or not, I think that's actually one of the plans, maybe even the infrastructure plan. Don't quote me on that. But a lot more forest management is certainly important. Makes a big difference how well maintained forests are. Wildfires have been around well before even modern humans, or say modern people, were around. The indigenous tribes in the area used to use them to their advantage. It's definitely an issue. It's an ongoing issue. Before PG&E caused them, it was lightning strikes. It's certainly an issue, and it's something that's going to need to be addressed. It's the age-old thing of how you manage the environment, and then how you manage the fires and the people living there. It's big, and maybe perhaps with the infrastructure spending that will be looked at. Again, outside of my expertise, but good comments. Let's see. Oh, now I know who it is. Sorry. Now I'm having some fun. Now I know who the person was that was posting the comments. So that's good. I can pick on you later on. No, but they're all very important things. We can solve for almost anything. Even the biggest crises that we fear are facing us can be solved if we can unify and pull together. We have done it countless times. Unfortunately, America tends to do the best when our back is up against the wall and we're forced into action. It would be nice to see steps taken towards this, because it affects everyone's quality of life. All of this, again, ties back into infrastructure, which is, I think, the last and final question that I have on here, which is, okay, it says, thank you very much for this presentation. It was really useful information, and I enjoyed hearing you talk. Can you talk a little bit about the economy as it pertains to educational opportunities and where my kids should go to college? What my kids should go to college for. So fun. It's the other thing that is always said, it's like you say to your kids, be whatever you want to be, follow your heart, do your passion. And the thing that I want to throw out there is, as an economist and as someone who's never been a mother except to my pet rats, So this is going to maybe sound a little different. College is an investment. College is something that many families are saving significant amounts of money at their own, expense to put their kids into a college to give them the greatest opportunity. The type of degree you get really matters. Data scientists right now are commanding like rock star salaries. Data scientists, right? Who would have thought? There's a lot of professions out there that have a lot of great opportunity financially going forward in the future. So it's very important to focus on what is going to give you the greatest opportunity to do the things you love. Now, if you have zero interest in being a data scientist or an engineer or any of the other very high paying jobs that are out there, you don't want to be miserable for the 40 or 50 years of your life you're going to be working. So do follow your passion. Just be sure that the level of debt that you have taken on to get that degree is commensurate with the salary that you're likely to receive. That's where the trouble happens. Student loan debt is not a problem in and itself. Most of us take on debt to buy property, at least the first time. We take on debt sometimes to buy cars. Debt is not a bad thing if there's a reason behind it. Okay? You are investing in your future. Taking on a manageable amount of debt, if that's what's necessary to get you there, is worthwhile, because that's the seed that's going to start you in the direction you want to go. Where the trouble lies is when the debt is way outside of what you possibly can earn to pay that debt back. I know there's a debate whether college should be free or subsidized or this or that. All things have consequences. When it becomes free, it doesn't have the same value than when it's paid for, though it increases the opportunity. There may be some hybrid type of in the future. It's being proposed now, free community college. So basic college is free for everybody. If you want to go further, you're going to have to pay for it, or scholarships or the like. Not my area of expertise to get into what's the right or wrong there, but from an economic perspective, follow your heart, do what it is, or I should say in this case for your kids, do what it is that interests you, but also have an eye towards, if you want to be a social worker, an artist, or anything like that, make sure the debt's in line with that work so that you aren't struggling your whole life to pay it back, or in a situation where you can't really do your passion because you have to work somewhere else to pay on that debt. So I don't know if that's, again, it's not necessarily motherly advice, but from an economic perspective, student loan debt should be looked at just as seriously as mortgage debt. Mortgage debt, how people look at it since 2008, because before that it got a little squirrely for a while. But that should be looked at. It is an investment. Use it and use it wisely. Don't go to college, join the trades. You know what? That is really, really good point. That is a really good point. I have some pretty well-off retired clients that had businesses like plumbing, businesses like floor laying, carpentry, I'm not probably using it, flooring businesses. A lot of the trades are very, very, very good professions. And unfortunately, we've gotten away from encouraging our kids to go into these professions. But if you're really good with your hands and you have the skill and then the enjoyment, I would actually say if I wasn't doing what I was doing, I would want to be doing something like that where I could meet different people and be out and kind of using skills to build things. Probably be out in nursery or something like that because I love plants so much. But you can make a great deal of money and be quite successful at that. And here's the beautiful thing. A plumber is just as much needed to unblock that toilet in a recession as he or she is in a booming economy. No shortage of them. Do you say, wow, my portfolio is down, I'm just not going to unplug that toilet for a while? No, you might do that about a vacation or a car or something like that, but you're not going to do it about that. So that is a really, really important thing to do. Some of those professions are more recession safe than others, but it's a great skill, and it cannot be exported, it can't be offshored, and it's going to be a need for the foreseeable future. So certainly look at that, and I would love to see the trade schools more promoted as a viable opportunity, a really good opportunity for kids as they're deciding what to do. Not everybody wants a 4-year business degree. No. I think I got the questions. I'm really hoping, because I'm coming up on my time here. I might not be able to get to this last one, and I apologize. It's a story. I'm not going to share the name. And I just don't do that by habit, simply because confidentiality. 6 kids. My brother is the only one who didn't go to college. He became a trained mechanic and now owns a very successful auto shop. He is more successful overall than the other 5 of us in many ways. There you have it. Not even from my mouth, from someone who's experienced it. We're coming up on our time today. I so miss seeing you in person. Many of you are coming in the office. Please come in the office. I'm more than happy to do in-person meetings, have been since the beginning of this. If this is a better way, I will do Zoom. I will talk to you by phone. I really, really love the opportunity to talk and communicate and share strategy. I don't like to bother you with it. That's why I do this webinar, so people can join as they want to, and a lot of people register and get the recordings later. But I am here and I am available anytime you want to talk about anything I talked about today or anything else going on in your life or anything you're curious about. I am so incredibly grateful to all of you for the confidence that you've placed in me through an incredibly challenging year on many, many fronts. The fact that you entrusted me with your financial decision making, whether it be your investments or your financial planning. You trusted a team of Sequoia and our brilliant financial planner, Katie, and the rest of the Sequoia team to navigate this time and to help care for you, is why you are where you are today. And I am incredibly grateful on so many levels for that confidence and for where we are today. And it's hard to express. I don't even know the words to express. And the best one I can think of is thank you. Thank you very, very much. I am here to serve and to care for you and anyone you send my way. This is my life's work, and I thank you all for your continued listening to these webinars. Any ideas, suggestions, recommendations, thoughts, share them with me. And the last thing I'll say is I apologize. I did not get back to every one of you who thanked me for the Forbes award. I've just been very busy with tax season. I mean it, truly mean it. Every one of your emails I read, and every one of them I thought of you, and I'll do my best to get back to you, but thank you for that. It was quite a surprise to me as well. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to talking to you next month. Give me ideas about topics, give me ideas and suggestions, and we'll get them through. And if I don't talk to you sooner, see you next month. Bye for now.